2 forks, 2 testers, 4,000 laps of Easy Does It. This is Fork Off. There are 2 new dampers, 2 revisions of race-winning tech. Now today sees the release of RockShox's new 3.1 Charger damper, which is very apt because only a few weeks ago did we see the release of Fox's new Grip X2. While Fox with their X2 damper, I would say, have been a bit more thorough, and it definitely constitutes a redesign rather than a refresh. But both of these dampers have already appeared on race-winning bikes, and they're going to appear on a lot of your bikes in the future. So we thought we'd cut through the noise and give you a back-to-back comparison of how these new dampers shake out. The RockShox damper sees a revision to both the compression and rebound circuits. You see less low-speed compression on this fork, which basically means the open mode will feel more open. Conversely, the high-speed compression pyramid, which is the thing that controls oil flow through the main orifice, has been revised, meaning that the closed position of the high-speed damping adjustment will feel more closed. The Charger 3.1 also has aftermarket tuning kits, so if the stock level of damping isn't quite right for you, you have further options. The 3.1 also has a rebound circuit that is far lighter, meaning that open position is very, very fast indeed, but it largely gives you more adjustment across the whole range, so this is going to suit a broader spectrum of riders of differing weights. Much like the Fox, the Zeb also sees new bushes in the lowers. These, RockShox claim, are derived via the lessons they learned when developing the new Boxer. The tighter tolerance bearings should provide less friction, giving you a more sensitive fork. The Fox Grip X2 sees much more of an overhaul than the revisions you're seeing to the Charger damper from RockShox. So what have they done? Well, the base valve is now bigger, going from 20 to 24 millimeters. Now, reading through Fox's literature, they've really focused on something called pressure balancing. Now, without getting too technical, basically what this means is there is a mid-valve that normally is unchecked when it comes to compression circuitry. However, for the Grip X2, adding a low-speed shim to the mid-valve means that basically the oil can have more freedom as to where it flows. What that means is they can then focus that main base valve on the higher compression needs of the high-speed circuit. So essentially what you're getting is by separating the needs of the low and high-speed circuits further, you're able to get a base valve that can give you more high-speed damping, whilst also not overwhelming it with having to do the job of the low-speed circuitry as well. That's what this clever adjustment to the mid-valve does. Once you've got the oil flowing through that low-speed shim on the mid-valve, the damper, to be honest, works in a very similar way that the Grip 2 damper did. But this is just a way of separating the needs of high and low speed circuitry further. Much like the RockShox Zeb, you can now get more aftermarket tuning options to get what is already a very adjustable fork even closer to your preference if you have some outlying demands. Now that's enough of me waffling on. Let's get to the bit you actually care about. Let's get these things into the bike park. So Kaz, we're here in Whistler Bike Park. What are we doing and how are we testing these forks?
We're riding chairlifts, which is the best part. We're doing lots of laps and the chairlift makes it a lot easier, but we're doing repeated laps, same trail. Typically Whistler downhill has been our track of choice because it's got a lot of good quick hits. It's got some a little bit slower speed stuff too, so a good mix, and it's just a great testing ground for both forks.
And do you think this is representative, Whistler downhill, which is the trail that we're on, of a sort of enduro racetrack, or is it something people would have fun on? How would you describe it?
Yeah, it's like it's a black diamond trail, but it is something that's not, it's got a good mix and it's high speed, but it's nothing super crazy. So you're not hitting massive gaps. You're not just doing, it's not pushing the limits of the fork, but it is something that's definitely getting to the edges of its capabilities, I'd say.
And how useful is it to do back-to-back comparisons that are not only repetitive in terms of we doing more than one cycle, but also in between going back and forth.
Oh yeah, it's huge. I mean, you can really tell the difference when you do one fork to the other. Yeah, if you just ride one fork and then the next day take another one, you just don't get that immediate sense of the feedback. So yeah, it's great for bracketing. So we try the extremes of the range of the compression, rebound, all that. And also for just taking one fork on, taking off, put the other fork on, go back and forth that way.
Well, we've got a matching kit on. The chairlift is nearing the top. So let's go smash some forks into some horrible rocks.
Let's do it.
So Kaz, 2 forks, 2 revisions, or maybe redesigns, depending which language you use. How noticeable is this step from the last model, starting with the 38?
I'd say it is noticeable. If you do back-to-back, it's noticeable, but with all of them, it's not drastic, and I think we need to address that the previous versions of these forks were really good. So it's not like this fork is broken, let's totally throw everything away and go to something new. But yeah, it is noticeable. I think if you go back-to-back, the biggest thing is you have a better range of adjustments. So you can kind of really, if you're someone that previously was on one or either end of the spectrum as far as low speed or high speed compression, you have a little bit more room to kind of find your sweet spot now.
Absolutely. I mean, it feels like one of the biggest difference that the Zeb has is kind of in the rebound tune as well. Mm-hmm. The rebound tune is very fast now. Now that's really going to suit riders who are perhaps lighter riders run less pressure or a lower spring rate. So sometimes if we try and have like a one size fits all approach to rebound damping, they can be left off the end of the spectrum. When it comes to compression damping, how would you say these forks compare, and where were you sitting within the settings?
Starting with the 38, I was typically all the way open on both. I'd be all the way, or close to, typically I'd be, this is on the previous version, so I'd have low speed almost all the way open, and high speed, same thing, I'd probably be like one click in from full open. On this one, I'm a little bit closer to center, still more towards the open side. I think I'm gonna stay from full open, even though that's not trendy, but I'm closer to that than to full close. So 6 clicks in from full open on low speed, and then I think I'm 3 in on high speed. So still not all the way open, so a little bit of a change, but not drastic.
And on the Zeb?
And on the Zeb, I'm usually typically right in the middle. So in the middle for low speed and in the middle for high speed.
Yeah, I found it interesting. I typically ran closed. We kind of have different setups when it comes to forks. I tended to have closed high speed on the Fox, and then the low speed was all about like tuning so you didn't get a too large a discrepancy between the two. On the new Fox, I'm actually running less high speed. I feel that closed position is something quite severe now, which I actually quite like, because there are riders that are bigger than me and they ride heavier. They're more aggressive riders than me, so it's great to give them options. Similarly enough with the RockShox, I used to run closed high speed again, but I found the threshold for low speed was, I felt, it's kind of, RockShox say their design eliminates crosstalk. I felt in the previous version, you kind of just added more damping overall. This one, it's easier to separate and treat high and low speed individually. So whereas previously getting very similar axle speeds, running high speed closed and low speed fully open, I'm now high speed closed and low speed sort of middle to closed, depending on the day and the track sort of thing.
Yeah.
Which I think is a lot better, and it means that, again, for lighter riders and riders of different weights, they're going to have more options.
Yeah, and I think we should stress that your setup tends to be not an outlier, but different than what they're recommending, but it's working for you and it's fine, and you found that there's more range to accomplish your desired setup goal. So that's important for everybody, really. And I think we were talking about rebound before, and it can go very, very fast on the Zeb, but it can also go pretty slow. So should also stress that rather than just going one side, they kind of broaden the range for both. So you can get faster rebound or slower rebound, so that should ideally work well for heavier or lighter riders. So it's almost like if you're a bike company adding more sizes to your lineup, they kind of added more sizes to the fork lineup. And there's even aftermarket bits that they offer now too. So you can go with a lighter compression tune, lighter rebound tune, that's from RockShox, and then with the Fox, you could retune the shim stack if you wanted to. Absolutely,
and you can also get from Fox those black, like the top hats, to change as well. I mean, I think it's quite interesting, you've seen smaller companies do this, in terms of Formula has that drop-in system, so does Manitou with varying degrees. And it's great to see these bigger companies kind of, not necessarily fall in line with that, but give customers the range of adjustment in sort of preset aftermarket alternatives. So 2 top-of-the-line forks that are both very good, which are sort of advancements on forks that were already very good. With more adjustment, is there any way to make these forks feel the same? Riding back to back, what were your findings?
I mean, like when I was going back to back, I would set the forks up at almost exactly identical sag and, experimenting with volume spacers so that they were reaching the end of their travel at a similar amount, like the same drop would make them go through the same amount of travel, but they do still feel different. And it is, subtle's not the right word, but it's also, like neither one is wrong. I think that's the thing. There's a different feel, and I know what I prefer, but I think that some people might prefer something else. But I think what I was noticing was that the Zeb feels a little bit more muted. I think an analogy I thought of is if you pictured you're wearing like a thin glove versus a thicker glove. So the Zeb to me felt like a thicker glove. It kind of just smooths things out a little bit differently than the Fox. Where the Fox felt like I could sense the ground a little bit better for me. It's like almost like I knew exactly where my front wheel was and what it was doing. Where the Zeb was a little bit more vague, and even vague is a little bit, I don't want to use too strong of a term because it's such a subtle difference, but I did notice a difference between like how they felt, especially on wetter, slipperier conditions, how I could tell what the fork was doing. How was it for you?
I think for me, again, to make the comparison, I felt that the RockShox fork like sucked itself to the ground. The Fox fork drove itself into the ground. And I felt that ultimately, when the pace was high and the running was dry, the Fox fork is what I would go for. I felt like it was like the race fork, but actually the grip and the sort of tracking of the Zeb was really, really impressive. And I did something similar to you. I did some like data logging, and I got the compression stroke pretty much the exact same speed. But when I experimented getting the rebound the same speed, it was actually to the detriment of the fork's performance. And I think that's part of like, I feel that there's something going on in the negative air chamber of the RockShox, which feels like it's just a bit more fluttery. And you feel that across kind of their whole range, right?
Yeah, I mean, they do have those buttercups, which we're not able to isolate those. So that could be adding to that little bit of like extra fluttery feel. But yeah, I think that, that initial little bit of just kind of like muted flutteriness, that's kind of where the Zeb has that. So people that want that ultimate traction, I think the Zeb is gonna fulfill that need.
When it comes to the idea of racing and riding, do you think there's one stronger contender than the other?
I mean, I think you can get them set up pretty similarly as far as, we talk about mid-stroke support or even overall support. I do think that the Fox has a little bit more, it tends to sit a little bit higher in its travel, at least the way that I was finding it. And I think that gives it what we could call a more racy feel, where you're just kind of more upright and poised, ready to kind of just continue attacking down the trail, where the Zeb might be a little bit more on the comfort side. Again, it's subtle, but I do think that like, if I thought in my mind, what's a racier fork, I would go with the Fox, but that doesn't mean you can race both of them, and they're both really,
well, they're both winning forks
exactly.
already.
Like, if you're on one or the other, you can't be like, oh, I would have won if I was on something else. Like, that's not the case. But I think just the way that the Fox feels, it's a little bit more, it's hard to put sensations into words sometimes. Sportier, racier, just a little bit more upright in travel. Angrier, just a little bit more like aggressive. I don't know.
Absolutely.
Something like that. We're trying not to fence it too much, but these are obviously very good forks, both at the top of the line. This is the newest, latest, and greatest versions. But is there something you would still want to see changed? Revision 6.0 or whatever?
I would love to see, I think that we're at the stage now with these 38mm forks, which are so capable, that the 180mm post mount of the Fox, we've moved past it now.
Yeah.
It should be a 200 or 203, depending on which way you sit.
Please go 200. But yeah, if you're running a 180, you shouldn't be running a 180 rotor on your giant fork like this. That's just not,
it's not how
it makes it so much easier. And it adds weight too. So if the weights of the forks end up almost identical once you add that adapter onto the Fox fork.
So, no fence sitting here, Kaz. You get to choose between these two quite amazing forks. We don't actually know which one the other prefers. Obviously, we've done a bit of testing together, we've discussed our ideas, but I thought it'd be fun to say on 3 what our favourite fork is and then explain our thinking. So, 1, 2, 3, Fox.
38.
Yeah. Why did you come to that conclusion?
I did a lot of back-to-back testing, a ton of laps in the bike park and even back at home. And there's something about the way I can tell what the front wheel is doing. And I think it's not as much the tracking as the sensation that I'm just like, it's hard to put into words again, but yeah, I can really feel the ground a little bit better. And I think that might make it seem like it's harsh or something like that. It's not a harsh feeling. It's just I know what the front wheel is doing, and that kind of lets me know like where I'm going. So.
I feel that in the Zeb's nature and the willingness to break into its stroke, it is very impressive the way it tracks to the ground, but it feels like you lose a bit of precision. The Fox, when the ground moves a millimeter, the fork moves a millimeter, whereas the Zeb, sometimes it feels like it almost overcompensates as it breaks into the stroke. It's funny, every time I did back to back, I'd be like, wow, the 38's a really good fork. Then I get on the Zeb and I go, oh my God, this is amazing too.
Yeah.
Then I get back on the 38 and I go, but this is better. for me.
Yep, that was the same way. Yeah, the Zeb's a little bit busier, I think is kind of a way you could term it. Like it's using its travel. It is really eager to go into the little initial stroke, and that helps it have a lot of traction in the wet. But I think for that overall level of support, just that kind of just general feel, I did prefer the 38. But again, I'd be happy with either one. But if it was my money right now, I would go the 38. There you have it. That's the new RockShox Zeb versus the Fox 38. We had a good time doing tons of back-to-back laps. Hopefully you learned something from watching this video.
Absolutely. I mean, both are great forks, and don't forget to check out the full article on the Pinkbike homepage. Thanks for watching, and get in the comments to let us know what you want to put on your bike.